Hey guys, Solidus here, and today I'm going to be talking about Holy Paladins and my experience with them on the Shadowlands beta so far, and sharing my first impressions of this class. So let's get into it. Okay, so when the pre-patch goes live and you log in to your Paladin, the first massive change that you are going to notice is the Holy Power Builder Spender system that they have reintroduced into the Holy Paladin playstyle. We now have certain abilities that build Holy Power, such as Crusader's Strike and Holy Shock, and then we have abilities that use that resource, such as Word of Glory, your Light of Dawn, Shield of the Righteous, and it's this new playstyle which is probably going to take getting used to the most. Now, I quite enjoy this playstyle. I didn't think I was going to like it as much as previous iterations. However, after testing this out, it has proven to be fairly enjoyable and also requires a bit of skill to manage your builder spenders and what to spend them on appropriately throughout whatever you're doing in the dungeon. So, yes, I have quite enjoyed playing this spec in this style. So in terms of spells and abilities that have come back to us then, we've had a number of things return, such as Hammer of Wrath, the execution style ability, which also generates a 1 holy power. We've had auras such as your Retribution aura come back. And overall, there have been a number of abilities that have been part of this unpruning, as it is being called, which gives us a bit more flavour as a paladin and brings back some of our utilities. Although, that being said, it hasn't been game-changing or necessarily says you have to have a paladin in your raid, although it is nice for Devotion Aura, for instance. In terms of talents, we've seen a few changes, with the biggest one being on the last row for level 50. Yes, the trait that made Holy Paladins so appealing and strong in Battle for Azeroth is now a talent on the level 50 row, and that is the Glimmer of Light. Now, this works in the same way pretty much as it does in BFA, although it has been reduced slightly. And it essentially exactly the same. Whenever you Holy Shock someone, whether that's an ally or an enemy, it will leave Glimmer of Light on them, and then they either are healed or take damage every time you use Glimmer of Light. So with some of these abilities and talents that have come back in, there are typically two different types of playstyles you can go with on a Holy Paladin. The first is your typical stand back and be much more of a caster type healer, and then the second is get in the enemy's face. You are a melee healer, using your Crusader Strike to then use Holy Shocks and apply Glimmer and so on and so forth, which we've seen quite common throughout the end of Battle for Azeroth. This is my preferred playstyle. I have found that since I've started healing, I have preferred the types of healing when you are much more involved in DPSing as well, such as like the Fist Weaving style, Discipline Priest, Cat Weaving with Resto Druid, being able to help out the group in terms of damage whilst healing. I have just thoroughly enjoyed. So for me, the Glimmer style of play is where I would be spending most of my time. They have made some changes to the way in which this works. So, for instance, there is now a mana cost to your Crusader's Strike. It isn't massive, but it is noticeable. I don't think that Blizzard want what happened in Battle for Azeroth, where Holy Paladins just pretty much never ever worry about mana. It's just never been an issue. And I haven't run out of mana in the beta, but my mana bar has dropped considerably compared to what I've been used to when I've been trying this out in BFA. So overall, in terms of changes to the way the class plays, the builder-spender style of play with Holy Power, I think is enjoyable. It's good. The changes to the talents, again, if you want to play that Glimmer of Light build, it is there, but then you have got things like you can Beacon of Virtue or Beacon of Faith and have like a second beacon up. and so on and so forth. And there are some different talents that you can pick dependent on what you want to do. So for single target healing, for instance, I am typically running Bestow Faith on the level 15 row, which is an instant cast ability on a short cooldown where it begins to mend the wounds of a friendly target and then it heals them after 5 seconds, and it does generate 1 holy power. For single target healing in Mythic Plus, I found this a really good and strong ability. If you are wanting to focus more on AoE healing though, for instance, you might want to take Light's Hammer, which is where you throw your hammer to the ground and then it deals damage to nearby enemies and heals up to 6 nearby allies. And that is on a 1 minute cooldown, and it lasts for 14 seconds. AoE healing is quite good, but in a Mythic Plus environment, what I found was my tank would typically just like move the pack out of range of the hammer, and it was just wasted healing. But that's probably because tanks aren't used to playing in that style, or having that ability there. So it depends on what you want to do, but my talents typically have been Bestow Faith on the first row, Judgment on the second. Then I've gone with either Fist of Justice or Blinding Light. Blinding Light because there are some long casts that you want to be able to break in some of the dungeons. Rule of Law on the level 35. Holy Avenger, which has been changed in Shadowlands, and it now triples your holy power generation. So when you use this ability, you just generate so much holy power, and you can either pump that into damage or you can pump it into healing, whichever one you see fit. I then go into Sanctified Wrath, which extends your Avenging Wrath and it reduces your Holy Shot cooldown. And then finally on the last row, Glimmer of Light. And that's been the build that I have been running. I haven't found it to be too much of an issue in terms of talent, but where the issues that I've been finding are in dungeons is just that my heals don't feel particularly strong, especially outside of Avenging Wrath. And I think that is one of Holy Paladin's biggest problems, is outside of your cooldowns, you aren't particularly great, especially at AoE healing when the group has dropped quite low, and you need to bring them up quickly. Some of your heals just hit like a wet noodle, and sometimes you don't even see the health bars move at all, or at least it doesn't feel like you do, whereas some of the other healers that I've been playing, like Resto Druid or Discipline Priest, for instance, even outside of cooldowns, the healing just feels strong. And it might just be a perception issue, but that's just how it's come across. During your cooldowns, for instance, though, completely different story, and you can pretty much top the group as quickly as possible. And the fact that Avenging Wrath and your Avenger's Wrath and your Holy Avenger are being taken off the cooldown now, the GCD now, it's just a really good cooldown to use. Now, in BFA, I typically used both of these abilities at the same time. In Shadowlands, you want to stay away from that, I have found, and use them separately, one after the other. And then you've also got Devo and Sack, and you've got Bubble to play around with. One ability that I have been using that has helped massively, though, in AoE healing when needed is Define Toll, which is the Kyrian Covenant ability for Paladins. This is such a fun ability to use, and it has been really strong. The way that it works is dependent on what you are targeting, whether that is an enemy or whether it is an ally. It will cast, in Holy, it will cast 5 Holy Shocks. So if you are using it on an ally in a 5-man environment, then all of your party will have Holy Shock applied to them. So they all get that burst of healing, and then Glimmer of Light is left on them if you are using that talent. This has saved me so many times, and it really makes a difference. And if you have your Avenger's Wrath up, then your health bars just go straight to the top. If you're targeting an enemy, if you are fighting a single target boss, for instance, then it will cast 5 Holy Shocks on that boss for big damage. And if you are in a pack and you use it on an enemy, then it typically spreads to 5 different enemies, which then obviously you can then go into more of an AoE damage type rotation, because every time you use Holy Shock since, then all 5 of those enemies will be taking damage as well. It's a really cool ability. and it's just, it helps, and you can use it in different ways. And then with the Kyrian as well, you do get the summon steward with the vial of serenity to heal, remove bleeds and curses and so on again, which is quite useful, especially in the raid. There are some bosses where you will find that you can make use of that. In terms of other covenants, then, the only one that I've really played with and tried is the Venthyr one, and have Ashen Hollow. It looks cool. It's good for damage, potentially. But it just, for me, it doesn't compete with the Kyrian Covenant. And the other plus side to that as well is, for me personally, the Kyrians fit the Paladin so much more than Venthyr. The Transmog, I think, suits the Elysian Hold, the Covenant Hall. It just screams Paladin to me, especially the Holy Paladin. So for me, I will be going with Kyrian in terms of that, and it works great for your other specs as well. If I switch to tanking, then it casts Avenger's Shield like on 5 different enemies at the same time, and just seeing all these shields go out is just really fun. So that's in terms of like covenants and your talents and abilities and so on. In terms of legendaries, this again for me is probably personally the biggest weakness for a Holy Paladin. The legendaries just don't excite me. They don't particularly scream legendary. The one which was outperforming brilliantly at the start of beta was the Holy Shock Barrier, which is whenever you Holy Shocked somebody, it left a barrier protecting them, absorbing some damage. That got nerfed so that you could only apply it to 3 people at the same time. And that is the one that I have typically been running. I've tried the one where every time you use Hammer of Wrath, it extends your your Avenging Wrath by 1 second. So, yeah, the legendaries just don't excite me. In raids, however, there is Maraud's, which is potentially going to be great for raiding, especially with your spot healing. As what it does is when you use Light of Dawn, dependent on how many allies are within your Light of Dawn, it makes your Light of the Martyr stronger. So because you are in a raid, people tend to be stacked up a lot more. Your Light of Dawn will typically catch more people, which then makes your Light of the Martyr stronger, so you can use it to spot heal people that are taking massive amounts of damage. And that's probably the one that I would run in a raid. For raiding, I think there is a spot for Holy Paladins. I think there's a one spot there. They're good for Devotion Aura. Obviously, you'd want that in the raid group. But not having a battle res, for instance, it isn't great. And there are other classes out there which are outperforming Holy Paladins within raid. Disc Priest being one, for instance. Mistweaver is a potential, depending on what happens with them over the coming weeks. They could potentially be a better spot healer. I don't know until we see more testing going on. But overall, I think Holy Paladins are in a good place, especially for Mythic Plus. They're not the strongest, but they're certainly not the weakest. Personally, I would just like to see some more exciting legendaries come out of that. And I've done Torghast as well with a Holy Paladin. Easy. Yeah, running through Torghast, especially even in Holy Spec, I just found ridiculously easy. But then I found that for most of the classes as well. So overall, I'm quite impressed with Holy Paladin. I like the playstyle. I would just like to see perhaps, I don't know, either a change to Judgment, maybe creating one Holy Power. Although that might cause issue with one of the talents, Judgment of Light being an absolute mandatory pick. And yeah, just seeing what happens with the legendaries, if anything changes. So overall then, I'm impressed. I'm happy with Holy Paladin. I think it'd be worth playing one, especially if you are going to be doing Mythic Plus and raiding. I think there is a spot there for both of those scenarios. And yeah, we'll see. We'll probably still see these towards the top of the leaderboards on Raider.io. So there you go. Thank you very much for watching. If you liked the video, please feel free to drop me a like below. Let me know what you think of Holy Paladins in the comments. And if you're not already, please feel free to subscribe to the channel for more news and updates on Shadowlands as they come out. Thank you very much.